Hey YouTube, I'm Ross Stewart, Stewart Media Digital. Sorry for the lack of variety of videos lately. You all know what's going on. This is shot spring 2020. If you're watching this in the distant future, hopefully this is all over and done with. But anyway, back to business. Today we will be talking about the Sony 85mm 1.8 prime lens. So the first thing I want to say about this lens is that I absolutely love it. It is great value for money at about $600. I've used it shooting professional events, product photography, weddings. I love taking it traveling. The smaller size is a huge benefit for just like weight, balance, taking it around with you on Sony's mirrorless cameras. It fits great on aps-c and full frame bodies. But anyway, let's jump in and really take a deep dive into this lens. As usual, the first thing I want to talk about is build quality. This lens is really nicely made. It feels really sturdy in the hand. It is mostly a plastic construction to cut down on weight, but it does have a layer of metal on the outside. I also really like the matte black finish. It looks sleek and stylish, but it still looks really professional for a lens this size. Now, talking about size and weight, this lens comes in at about 13 ounces or 371 grams, and the size is nice and compact. It fits really nicely on Sony's full frame bodies and pretty well on the aps-c bodies. It is a little bit big on aps-c, but it's nowhere near as ridiculous as a lot of Sony's other lenses. Speaking of aps-c, this lens behaves like a 127.5mm lens, so it goes from about mid telephoto to actual kind of telephoto, and it does become pretty tight on aps-c. Not a big deal, but something to think about if you're interested in buying this lens, but only shoot on aps-c. The focus ring on this lens is pretty smooth. It's not the best, and it is focused by wire, so I definitely wouldn't prefer it for manual focus in photo or video, but it does have a little bit of resistance, so it's not too bad. The only features on this lens are the autofocus manual focus switch. That's really nice to have, so you don't have to dig through the menus to switch to manual focus if you ever do choose to shoot in manual focus. A lot of the cheaper Sony lenses don't have it, but this one does, and I'm really glad about that. Additionally, it has one focus lock button, which is also programmable to be just about anything you want. I never really program these to anything, but if you do like shooting with it, then it is really nice that this has one. This lens does not have a manual aperture ring. I didn't really expect it to, but some of Sony's higher end prime lenses do have the manual aperture ring, and I've actually grown to really like it. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it, but I'm definitely someone who uses it when I shoot, and it would be nice to see. According to Sony, it is moisture and dust resistant. Some of the other lenses that say this have at least a small gasket. This one doesn't have any gasket, so it would make me really nervous to test this myself. So now with build quality out of the way, let's talk about image quality. The image quality out of this is really impressive, especially for a $600 lens. In my opinion, it rivals the Sony Zeiss prime lenses and the G Master lenses. Additionally, the bokeh is really nice. 85mm at 1.8 gets you really nice blurry backgrounds, and the bokeh is really beautiful. It does have quite a bit of cat eye, but the cat eye is nice and it kind of gives it this swirly effect in a lot of images. It does have a 9-bladed aperture, so besides the cat eye, the bokeh balls are really nice and round. This lens boasts an ED element to reduce chromatic aberration. In my own shooting, I barely ever notice it, and I'm really glad they included it. A small downside of this lens is that it does not have a very good minimum focusing distance. The minimum focusing distance is 0.8 meters or 2 feet 7 inches, but honestly, for an 85mm, if you're taking portraits, for example, that's plenty close. The autofocus is another place where this lens definitely punches above its weight class. The autofocus is really snappy. I use it on an A6500, an A7 III, and an A7 R3, and I have never had a single issue with autofocus on this lens. It's fast, reliable, eye detect, face detect, tracking in video. It all works really nicely. I even shoot a lot of situations where it's backlit and it never fails to hit that eye, to lock in, to track my subject. I cannot say enough good things about the autofocus on this lens. Another important thing to mention about the autofocus is that it is really quiet. So if you're shooting video or you're shooting, say, a wedding, it is really nice to know that it's not going to be making a lot of noise. That is one of the reasons that kept me from buying the more expensive G Master 85 1.4, is that that has issues with its autofocus in my opinion, and this one definitely does not. Now, speaking of this lens's G Master big brother, let's compare this lens to some of its other major competitors. So the 85mm 1.4 G Master is 3 times as expensive at about $1,800 US. It is much bigger, much heavier, and the autofocus is not as reliable, especially backlit. It's also slower and a lot noisier. That's what drove me to get this lens instead of the G Master version. I really hope that future iterations of the 85mm G Master fix some of these issues, and I would really love to see a 1.2 version. I don't know if that's possible, as Sony has a smaller lens mount than Canon, but Canon's 1.2mm is really a bokeh king. Another competitor would be the Zeiss Batis 85mm 1.8. That's also a 1.8 like this, and it's also really sharp. It has great bokeh, but it's $1,050 US. So in my opinion, you're getting a very similar lens for quite a bit more money. And another competitor that I think is a really great option if you don't care about size is the Sigma Art 85mm 1.4. You get a bit more low light with that 1.4 aperture. It's really sharp, the bokeh is great, the quality is great, and it's only about $950, but that thing is huge. It is enormous. And occasionally, third-party lenses do not have as good of autofocus. So while that lens is really great, definitely take size into consideration if that's something that's important to you. All right, so that's it for my Sony 85mm 1.8 lens. I have taken tens of thousands of shots with this lens, all sorts of shoots, and I love it for everything. I trust it for weddings. This lens is definitely a great value at $600. It goes in my bag with all my G Master and Sony Zeiss lenses. I can't say enough good things about it. I really hope Sony puts together that 85mm 1.2 G Master that has the better, more reliable autofocus. But until then, I will definitely be keeping this in my kit. Thanks so much. Please like and subscribe. See you guys next time.